Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Thorsten Suckow-Homberg and I would like to talk with you about dependency injection in JavaScript today. You can find some of my projects over at github.com/ThorstenSuckow. You will find a few ExtJS related projects there, such as Coon or JS, which brings some tools and utilities for ExtJS related projects. And my main work is done at eyeworkers in Germany, where I am senior software developer. And the agenda today is I would like to answer the question what dependency injection is, why do we need it, and how do we implement it. Let's start with the solid principles. The solid principles are, or let's say the solid is an acronym for 5 principles in software development and software design. And they were introduced by Robert Martin, aka Uncle Bob, in his book Agile Software Development: Principles, Patterns, and Practices. And the solid principles are, amongst others, the single responsibility principle, the open-closed principle, the Liskov substitution principle, the dependency inversion principle, and that is what we will talk, and the interface segregation principle. So let's talk about the dependency inversion principle, which is part of the solid principles. The dependency inversion principle helps with coupling dependency. It states that high-level modules should not depend on low-level modules. Both should depend on abstractions, the high-level and the low-level modules. And abstractions should not depend on details. Details should depend on abstractions. So the dependency inversion principle suggests that high-level modules should not depend on implementation details of low-level modules. Instead, clients provide interfaces representing contracts the servers need to implement so the client can use their work. Let's have a look at the following example. The employee repository is responsible for fetching data out of an underlying data storage. The employee repository is the client in the high-level module, and the naive approach is to hardwire the server, the DB connection class, with the employee repository's fetch employee method. Imagine there is a method called fetch employee, and that's responsible for fetching employee data out of a database or any data storage. This does not only create coupling, it also exposes infrastructure to a layer in the software system that should not be aware of such details. So to apply the dependency inversion principle for the given example, the client needs to provide a contract for the server. The server's responsibility now is to comply to the interface by implementing it. And it is stated that the lower level modules provide the implementation for interfaces that are declared within and called by the upper level modules. That on the lower right side, where the client provides an interface that the server has to conform to. So whenever we are making changes to the DB connection in the infrastructure layer, the DB connection is part of the infrastructure layer, these changes do not affect the employee repository. Additionally, employee repository can be reused with any server that conforms to the employee table gateway interface. So this is basically the inversion principle in a nutshell. And we will take a look at a way or an approach how we can make sure that the dependency inversion principle is used in our software by using dependency injection. So our goal is the following. We want to create an implementation that is capable of a constructor-based dependency injection. What does that mean in ExtJS? In ExtJS, this does simply mean that whenever we create an instance of a definition, our class resolver will check if there is any binding defined for the target class that gets created. And if that binding is defined, we will inject an instance of this binding into the target class. Now, since ExtJS is doing a lot of work with factories and factory methods, xcreate, for example, is a factory method, since it simply takes the name of the target class that has to get to be instantiated, and the factory will take care of resolving all the dependencies. We will use a slightly altered approach to the topic, and we will implement constructor-based injection in vanilla JavaScript. At the end of the talk, I will give you a link where you can find the ExtJS-based implementation, and it's fully tested and production ready, so you can use it with your projects. Okay, let's begin by starting the IDE of our choice. And what I have done so far is I have simply created a new NPM project. And the NPM project, the package JSON contains all the relevant information I need for this project. It's not much, it's simply stating that I will set up a development server with the help of Webpack, and you can find the configuration here. You will find all the sources we are implementing right now later on my Git repository over at github.com/Thorsten Suckow/di-js is the URL. But if you would like to code with me, that's fine as well. So we both we can learn along the way together. Okay. Let's have a look at the index.html, and the index.html is requiring a file source/index.js, and we will create this file now. Source/index.js. This file will contain a simple console log statement. Call back to hello world, of course. And let's have a look if the local web server is working. Loading, and that looks good. Switch to the console. So this is what we need. Okay, here's the console, and we see hello world. Okay, what would we like to do? We would like to do the following. We want to create a component with a call to the constructor of the target class. And we want to make sure that the component has a property called service, and the service should be a service class. So this is our test criteria for now. And of course, we need to import the sources for this. To require base component or import, sorry, from let's call it lib base component JS, and we need also the service class, so we can check for the instance service class JS. Let's create both files now. Create the directory lib, add a new file, base component. New file called service class.js, and both will contain class base component. Copy this service class, create service class here. Okay, let's export the service class and let's export the base component. See what we get in whole output. You will see that this returns false, and it returns false because CMP service is undefined. Let's define it. We want to make sure that there is a property that is called service that holds reference to an instance of service class. For this, we will import service class from service class. And what we have to do now is we have to go to the constructor, make sure that this instance gets created. This service is new service class. Reload again. Okay. Boss. So now we have true in our output, and that tells us, okay, component service is an instance of service class. The thing is, I have the coupling now created. The base component knows that there will be an instance of service, and the base component takes care of setting this requirement up. And we do not want it this way, because if we do it this way, we have strong coupling between the base component and the service class itself in a way that the base component creates instances of it. What we need to do is we need to remove this code and make sure that the dependency that base component has to service class gets injected from outside. We can do it in a way with, we can use dependency injection to make sure that the dependency gets injected from outside. Now we have to fall back to proxies in JavaScript and make sure that a proxy we are using for the constructor is setting up the requirements for this class properly. It gets a little bit tricky now, and if you haven't worked with proxies in JavaScript yet, I recommend you go over to the MDN and have a look at the API documentation of proxies. We will create a new file that is called, let's call it injectable. And injectable will create or define the proxy we need for the constructor-based injection. Injectable is a function this will be a function, and we will use it just like Angular does with its decorators. We will simply create a function that wraps a class and that applies or decorates the class with further information about how the class has to behave. Let's create a function that's called injectable. And injectable is a function that will have the parameters target and injections. So let's go back to index JS, our base component. Here's what we are aiming at. The base component gets injected, we are injecting dependencies into the base component by specifying in the first place what kind of dependencies the base component has. And we can do it outside this class definition, which means that we apply additional meta information to this class. Our target is injectable, gets called with the target class base component, and we define bunch of dependencies. And the dependencies are just like the test we have created, or the quasi tests. Service. The property service of base component needs to be of type service class. The target is, or what we want to do is, injectable will create a constructor-based proxy that checks if a service exists and inject the service class or an instance of service class into the instance of base component. In injectable, or let's first import injectable. So we have this one here, import injectable from /injectable JS injectable.js gets exported, and injectable will now contain a proxy handler, or we will implement a proxy handler for the constructor. So the first thing that happens when injectable gets called, it will create a proxy. And the proxy is applied to target. And the handler we're defining for this will be created as an object. And the handler will contain a method that is called construct. And that is a proxy for the constructor that's defined in the proxy API. When I call proxy with this handler and I have a construct method in there, the construct method is used to be used as a proxy for the construct method in the target class. And the construct proxy gets a target property and the args array, the original arguments the constructor of the target class got called with. And that is all we have to do for now. What we have to do is, since we are proxying the constructor, we have to make sure that indeed the instance of the target is created, and we have to do this by calling the constructor, the original constructor of the target class, with the arguments that are delivered through this method, our method. And let's do another console log here so we can check that we are properly being called. Calling proxied constructor and target, so we now know what we are dealing with. The base component should hopefully work right now. Let's have a look in the console. We do not get any errors here, but we also do not get information that our proxy is being created. And let's see why this is the case. We have our injectable class. The handler gets called with the target. And since we are returning the target, the proxy target here, we have to make sure that the base component class definition gets replaced with the injectable part. Now, ESLint will consider this as a warning, and this is why we will take care of this one by telling ESLint that it's just fine and it should ignore this issue. So base component gets replaced with the base component that got enhanced with our meta information. Let's have a look at the browser. And we will see that we are now calling the proxied constructor for base component. Okay, what we need to do now is we have to inspect the information we have with injections. Injectable gets called before an instance of target is created. That means that injections have to be somehow collected. So we can apply them later on once we create instances of our target class. And we can do this by making sure that injections gets applied to our handler. So we can later on call the injections we have created for this handler, for this explicit handler, once we are creating an instance of our target class. So let's do this. Here we are creating a constant, and the constant is the handler object together with the injections that were passed to the method. And we can now use tHandler, and handler now has a property called injections at type object, and that is private. Okay, what we need to do now is we have to map the injections to already existing classes. What we are striving for is we want to make sure that all the services we are using for our dependency injections, we want them to be singletons. This is so that we can use or reuse existing instances of services, and of course this has the prerequisite that services need to be stateless, otherwise we would catch aliasing bugs if we share the instances and other target classes change the properties of the instances, and those changes are causing some unwanted side effects. So just let's keep this in mind. If we want to create singletons out of our services, we have to make sure that they are stateless, but those are implementation details, and that is something you have to take care of later on, not part of this small workshop right now. Okay, Let's create a method which we will call map to singletons. And this is a function that will have a parameter mappings, and we will track all the singletons in an object called singletons. And map to singletons will return an array where we will map the property to the required class. And return the singleton instance if we have a match. We can check here if singletons, this is not existing. We will create this required class will then be an instance. The required class, this will be the singleton instance. And we will return the property along with the instance. Okay. So our injections will be replaced with concrete instances of the required classes. Let's build the array here. We'll check for the injections of the handler instance. You have to be aware of the fact that the handler is called with the constructor call of the target class. So this should contain all the injections for the properties. We should now be able to create an instance of the target class. And the instance of the target class will then be returned. So far, so good. Make sure that the slint is not complaining about our console log. This line for debugging purposes. Have a look what the browser is telling us. We're getting an error. We're still getting not an error. That's a good sign. Let's have a look at the injections. What does injections tell us? It says the following. It's an array with one entry, and we see that for the property service and service class is available, and we can now apply this property or this instance to the property from the mappings entries injections Object from entries injections. Typo. It's not correct. Object entry injections should be correct. Okay, this is an array, and we will use this array now with the property and the singleton. And now we can go ahead and apply the property to the instance. Let's make sure we do not accidentally overwrite something. Let's check for undefined. It's not existing. We create the property with the singleton and then return the instance. Have a look. Okay, we're still getting a false here. Let's have a look at instance. What does instance tell us? Console log instance. Let's debug it. See where we have made the mistake. Okay, this is the base component, and the base component, yes, this is the problem. We have constructor apply properly the destructuring assignment. And base component now has a property indexed 0, and that hints to an issue that we need to, this one here, of course. So it was a mistake removing it first place. Of course, we're getting an array with object keys and object values, and we have to rebuild this object with object from entries injections. Let's see what our says now, and it says that it's working. Okay, what we've done is we did not go to the base component class and we did not assign the dependency of the service class directly into the base component. Instead, we have configured it in the outside. And if you know Angular, you know that if you're using TypeScript, you can do stuff like this. You would write service base component. You can also provide the visibility at this place here. This makes it really, really easy to configure target classes with dependencies without stating the concrete instance the base component is using. And we have now created a simple, very simple proxy for constructor-based dependency injection with the help of our injectable method. And to apply this pattern to ExtJS, there is a little bit more work involved, since we have to also consider aliases that are used throughout ExtJS, and the way the factories work with this are a little bit different. but you can go ahead and take a look at the implementation over at github.com, CoonJS, ExtJS, libcore, tree main source IOC. There you will find the dependency injection approach for ExtJS with an inversion of control container. The way this works is a little bit different. Since we have to configure our target classes in ExtJS, they do not understand modern ECMAScript, unfortunately. And the way it works is we are using static properties that define the dependencies, and in a global configuration file, those bindings are configured. And by using the global configuration file, you do not need to reconfigure your target classes every time you need a concrete instances. What you have to do, though, is you have to make sure that the target class that are dependency injected provide at least the information what type of class they are using for their dependency. And once you have done this, you can configure all the instances that get bound to the target classes with the global configuration file. And a more elaborate description of the whole approach can be found at the blog article Dependency Injection in JavaScript, where I explain the way this works with ExtJS. You can find it at medium.com at Thorsten's Core. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think I'm not sure if Thorsten's on to do Q&A.
Hi. Yeah, I'm ready for Q&A. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, as I've already stated, the way this works with ExtJS is a little bit more complicated. So I have summed up all the details you need to know in the blog article. So that would be a good place to get a recap of the stuff we have I've shown you in this short workshop. Also, this was done with vanilla JavaScript and ECMAScript 6, and there are a few workarounds to get this stuff working with ExtJS. But it's working, and it's running in production mode on several products and projects. So it's a very convenient way to configure your dependencies at a global place. So you shouldn't miss dependency injection if you haven't worked with it yet.
Dependency injection is one of those things that, at least for me, took a little while for me to get my head wrapped around it. But then once I did, I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. I didn't realize this was a problem I was running into and didn't know what to call it, right? It was a problem I was having, but it's like I didn't know what to call it. And then once I found out what to call it, it's like, oh, I'm so glad there's a solution to this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you have to change your mindset completely, or the way you're trying to figure out a specific issue, and you're implementing it, and a few weeks later you see blog post or another implementation, and that's where you think, oh, all right, I know where this is coming from. I've done something similar. And there are a lot of smart minds out there, and all of them have probably found a solution already for any issues.
Do you have the link to that blog post I can put in the chat window for everybody?
Hold on. Let me quickly find my mouse pointer. It's gone again.
It does. Mine does that to me too.
Hold on. I'm gonna put it in.
Yeah. Okay. If anybody does have any questions, you can put them in the question panel on the right, which is going to be that way, if I remember correctly, and that we will we can answer them here for you as well.
Okay, I've pasted the link into the chat, but I'm not sure if all the people are getting this link.
I can send it out to everybody.
Yeah, you can broadcast it.
Yep. So I got a 404 from that.
Oh yeah, of course. There's the S is missing. It's not Thorsten Suckow, it's Thorsten Suckow. Hold on. Actually, there was already a dependency injection implementation for ExtJS 4, I guess, a few years back. It was quite popular, but the project is not maintained anymore. I've taken a look at it. This should work now.
Okay. That's like your blog. Is there a specific blog post about dependency injection? Oh, there it is. Dependency injection in JavaScript from December.
Entry.
All right, here we go. There's a link to the dependency injection blog post, and here is the link to your blogs in general. So you said there was a project for dependency injection?
Yeah, it was a whole framework built on top for ExtJS 4. But I'm not quite sure how it was realized, since I'm not sure if the proxy API for JavaScript existed back then when the guys fiddled around with it. So it's quite old. It's not maintained anymore. But if anyone's familiar with it, yeah, it was back in the days when ExtJS 4 was popular. ExtJS in version 4 was popular. But I've completely forgotten the name, but don't think it's very much of importance since it's not maintained anymore.
So,
but actually, anyone still working with ExtJS here, I think if you Google for ExtJS and dependency injection, you should find the project pretty quick.
Now, on your Medium blog, when I went to the dependency injection and JavaScript article, it says it's moved to your personal website. Is that?
Oh, that's just
an updated version of it.
Yeah, well, the article is gets updated on my personal website. I moved all the blog posts from Medium to my personal website, but both blogs are curated. So,
right. So that would be a better place for people to go if they want to read about this. Is your personal website there? Okay, because I know sometimes Medium blocks you people behind a paywall if they don't subscribe. So giving them that link would probably be more useful.
Yeah, true. I haven't figured out how it's working with Medium. Actually, I have to be honest. Sometimes I try to read a post and then it says I have to be a member, and then I wonder, what if I publish a blog post there? Do other people have to pay for this? I have no idea. That's why I moved my articles.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I like Medium from one point of view, but from as far as like accessibility, too often. Yeah, you write the article and then Medium charges people to read your article, and it's like, okay, so I put the link in there on that for that. Now, do you have your slides as well that we can share out for everybody? Is that, I didn't notice if that was on the, did you share those with the organizers to include your slides?
Yeah, I for sure can do that. The slides were like only 4-5 pages, and most of the information was in the source code. So I wasn't sure if the slides.
The source code. Are you going to put, if you want to just update your blog post with the any information that people need, like example source code and stuff, and then people can just send people there so they can get more information about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it Emerson so he can add the material to the to the conference page.
All right, great. Well, be sure to do that. And then I don't see any questions here, so yeah, people could just if you have any feedback around this session or other sessions, you can just follow that QR code there, and the replays will all be posted on the SenchaCon page you see there as well. So thank you, Thorsten, for the session. I know some people were saying they were definitely looking forward to dependency injection, and yeah,